Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here. There's been a lot of talk this morning about the Oil Pollution Act of 1990 and about what the responsible party is required to pay under that act. I think there's been general agreement from everybody who's spoken that BP would be liable to pay the costs of cleanup in the spill. And one of the big questions has been about the $75 million liability cap. I made some charts this morning because I thought it might be instructive to look at how that liability cap of $75 million compares to some of the costs involved in the spill. So if we look at this first poster, you can see at the bottom, if you have a magnifying glass, the $75 million in liability. Above that is the estimated damage to Louisiana's fishing industry, which is right now estimated at $2.4 billion. Above that, you can see the estimated damage to Florida's tourism industry, which is estimated at $3 billion. Above that is the dot that shows BP's profits for the first quarter of this year, $6.2 billion. And finally, the large dot at the top are BP's profits for 2009, which are $18.8 billion. I also thought it would be helpful to show how that $75 million fits into the total profits from BP for 2009, and I misspoke. The profits were $16.6 billion. But you can see that $75 million is a very tiny sliver of what BP's profits were. And I think that's why we're all hearing so much concern this morning about that $75 million liability cap. So the question that I really have, and I'm proud to be on Senator Menendez's legislation to raise that liability cap to $10 billion. But the question that's been raised this morning is, should we have a cap at all on liability? And does a cap encourage riskier behavior on the part of the industry? And I don't know, Mr. Pirelli, if you would like to take first shot at that.
I think in a situation where you have the risk of a similar major oil spill, you have activity that is risky itself but highly lucrative, and you have the companies that are engaged in it in the best position to invest in new technology to ensure it's safer, to ensure that they have sufficient staff, they ensure that they are complying with all of the federal regulations. That is a situation where not having any cap, we think makes a lot of sense and is consistent with the basic principle that a polluter should pay for all of the damage that they cause.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk about BP, and BP has said they will pay the total costs of the cleanup. I think most of us looking at the scenes on television would say that that cost of cleanup includes the cost of the booms, the cost of people raking in the oil. But what else is included in that cost of cleanup? Are all of the legal costs that the Department of the Attorney General is incurring right now included in that cost of cleanup? Is the time that the Department of the Interior is spending on this included in that cost of cleanup?
I'll speak first, and then maybe Mr. Bennett can add to it. But certainly the costs that are covered include public services, expenditures on public services, all of the damages to our natural resources, all of the efforts of agencies to minimize, mitigate the impact of the oil, the impact on subsistent uses of fishermen, and the economic impact. So it is a broad range of categories. I will say that this is certainly unprecedented in its scope, and there may be issues that arise that haven't been dealt with before, but certainly OPA was intended to cover a broad range of costs and damages.
And I'll just add, as Mr. Pirelli said, damages include unreimbursed removal costs, personal or property damages, lost profits or earnings, loss of government revenues, cost of increased public services, natural resource damages, and that's the damage side. On the response side, The Federal On-Scene Coordinator, Admiral Landry, is the authority for driving the response under the leadership of the National Incident Commander, Admiral Allen. So clearly, under OPA, those response costs are determined by her. So she needs something, for instance, the National Guard rollout we're paying for out of the fund to support her in covering that cost. The surge of government that you're seeing that we're all a part of is new ground, as Mr. Purley said. We really haven't ever done this before on that scale, and we're still working through some of the public policy questions of if it's clearly needed by the FOSC and the NIC, a lot of, getting teams of scientists together to evaluate dispersants or to evaluate flow rates, that's clearly something they need and want. It's paid for. If I were to go down and do a tour of the site, I would pay out of Coast Guard operating costs because I don't consider myself part of the response.
Thank you.